Hey, Tommy, you almost here, dude? We gotta do the roundtable on Return of the Living Dead. Okay, yeah, pull in the driveway, go to the side. Hey, there's a barrel on the side of the garage. Do not touch that barrel, okay? You did what? What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Christian Hannah here with Tommy, and today we're talking about, I don't know how high this ranks in your, like, just favorite movies ever. This is my #1 favorite horror movie in the world.
It's pretty high up there. It's definitely pretty high up there.
And obviously we're talking about Return of the Living Dead. So many things I want to talk about with this movie.
I'll tell you about the first time I saw it. I actually saw the second one first. And I was a little confused because I was probably 10 years old. I thought Return of the Living Dead Part 2 was a sequel to Night of the Living Dead. Like I said, this was before, you know, we had the internet, and I was just a dumb kid, so, you know, you think certain things. And I remember seeing this movie, Return of the Living Dead. I was like, wait, that's not the movie that I saw. So I rented it, and it was like, wow, this is like Part 2, but even better. Even though I have more of a fondness for Part 2 because I've seen it more because I actually owned it. Part 1 is, no doubt about it, it takes everything in Part 2 and just did it better. It's just a great movie.
What's really interesting, it's like, let's get into the legal issues of this movie. You know, so Romero makes Night of the Living Dead. He's got partners that were involved with this film. From what I understand, the writer of Night of the Living Dead got license of the words Living Dead.
Right.
And Romero got just Dead or something like that. So
yeah, exactly right.
It's almost a spin-off, or not a spin-off, but it's like an offshoot.
Yeah.
It's in like the realm of Night of the Living Dead. And it's just that alone, when you think about that, it doesn't make it sound like it's going to be like a great movie. Just in the connotation of that.
It's kind of meta because it exists in the universe as a movie that recognized that Night of the Living Dead was a movie. You know what I mean? Because it talks about how, like, it talks about Night of the Living Dead in Return of the Living Dead.
What's interesting as well is the guy who was, you know, the writer, John Russo, wrote a script, and then once the producers, Tom Fox and this person got on board and this person got on board, nobody liked it. Nobody liked the script. So then they got Dan O'Bannon to come in. Obviously I've never met him, rest in peace. I know he's no longer with us. I've heard stories about how strange this guy was.
Yeah.
The woman who played Tina, her story of going to meet the guy to go to rehearse scenes, there was pornography on the TV.
And I believe guns.
Which we've all been there. Just to actually hear about, like, okay, you're this young actor, you're getting ready. Oh, I'm going to be in this horror movie. I'm going to go audition. So you got this guy have porn on the TV and guns everywhere. And what did she do? Didn't she say, like, oh, I got an appointment?
Yeah, something like that. She quickly left.
I didn't realize until actually that documentary that you said you watched earlier, he wrote Alien. He seems like he was just a brilliant guy. Eccentric, probably.
Right,
strange, but brilliant. Dan O'Bannon comes on board with this movie and has this insane vision, and he has it sounded like he had this vision down to the last, like, credit line of the movie. He was so specific. For all intents and purposes, this is a zombie movie, but to me it's completely so much more than that. It's really the last thing I think about when I think about Return of the Living Dead is zombies.
Yeah, just a great movie. I mean, it's the perfect 80s movie. It's what makes 80s horror so great. It's the perfect combination of comedy and horror.
One thing that I think helps this movie so much, and it's funny you don't hear a lot of movies do this, they rehearsed before the movie shot. Chemistry is there, especially like when they're in the car driving and they're going to the cemetery, and it's just like, it's like you believe that these are like a group of punks and they've been together. And the funny thing was, like, in real life, none of them are remotely like that.
Right.
I do want to go ahead and get this out the way. Let's just talk about it, because I don't think a whole lot of people know about it, and this is not to disparage anybody. The Brian Peck issue. I mean, he was involved with Dan Schneider, and he worked for Nickelodeon, which I didn't even know. And I'm not saying that Brian Peck did anything, but I believe he was arrested.
No, he spent time. He was charged, so yeah, and it was supposedly a star on a Nickelodeon show, but the name was never revealed. But yeah, so I mean, it's hard not to have a little bit of a black eye because of that, but it's still, I think you can still enjoy the movie.
So just to let you guys know about that, because unfortunately, you know, I watched this Dan Schneider, you know, documentary on YouTube. It's a Nickelodeon documentary about the Dan Schneider, I won't get too much into it. Go watch that documentary if you want. But unfortunately, Brian Peck, which I had no idea he worked for Nickelodeon.
Right.
Number one, he worked with the kids. So.
And I think he was hired after he served his sentence or whatever. I think he was hired by Disney,
which is just strange, you know.
Yeah,
but
we'll
leave it at that. This movie had so much drama behind the scenes, and it's funny how good the movie came out. But I credit that to Dan O'Bannon. Tommy, I'm not a special effects guy. You're not a special effects guy, but what he had for the cadaver that's supposed to get, how could that guy get hired is what I want to know.
Right.
Like, that was miserable.
And a lot of people don't realize that actually is in a very small clip in the movie. It actually made it. There's a scene, it's far off, so you only see it for a split second. But it actually did make it in the movie. And once you see it, once you're aware of that and you see it, it is horrible.
Was thereafter fired, and then they brought in great guys like Kenny Myers and Tony Gardner, who did the half corpse, the woman, the old woman corpse.
I think they brought somebody in to help him after that, but he was eventually fired because of the zombies he was making to come out of the ground. It was basically the first zombie you see that comes out of the ground that's basically just a skeleton. That was his idea of a zombie, and they were like, no, this is not going to work, and that's when they let him go.
Yeah. This film was not without drama. I think there was also stories of Clu Gallagher throwing a can or something at Dan O'Bannon. Apparently, like we talked about, Dan had to have been this really eccentric guy who had such a vision that he would stop at nothing. He didn't care what he said to you, how he said it to you. You know, you're going to do this, you're going to do it how he wants. And while it came on screen, you know, you can't talk to actors that way, apparently. At least not to Clu Gallagher. Right. How they bring up Night of the Living Dead in this movie is something I want to bring up, because I think that's got to be one of my favorite scenes in the movie. James Karen is telling the story about... and what's funny is the very first time I watched this, my naive mind, like, I really thought it was almost true, because in the beginning of the movie, what did they say? Everything you're about to see is based on a true story. And my young mind believes it. You know, it's kind of like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre or something. You just believe it. You want to believe it, if anything. And so my young mind believed that Night of the Living Dead was based on a real story, and it was the government. Right. And, you know, the government made a mistake with this chemical, and they were trying to figure it out. And so...
Typical Army...
Obviously, later in the movie, Tina's character falls under the stair. And just there's a moment in the beginning of the movie where James Cameron's character says, watch that third step. Right. Just that simple stuff. You know, you can watch horror movies all day long and you won't see the attention to detail that much like Dan O'Bannon had. And
James Karen and Tom Matthews, what a great duo. They could have been in other movies as like a comedy duo like Chris Farley and David Spade, or, I mean, just any of those two guys. I mean, they were amazing.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, it's too bad that they weren't able to do other movies outside of that together, but...
Yeah, and it's such an unlikely duo, you know?
Right, yeah.
You know, what's really interesting is pan over to the punks in the car, and they're all, like, talking about Freddy. And I think even earlier is when they bring up Freddy the first time, and they're like, where's Freddy? Oh, he's at work. Well, we need to go get Freddy. He always knows where a party's at. So you see these punks, they're dirty, they're nasty. But you never see Freddy... I never see Freddy as a punk in the movie because he's mild-mannered. He almost seems like a sweet guy. The way, you know, you remember when James Karen is like, these are split dogs, and Freddy even goes, roof, and like a little kid would do. I love punk rock. I'm sure you love punk rock. You know, we listen to bands like Sex Pistols and Ramones, but like, I never walk out of my house looking like Suicide. Right, yeah. You know, he had chains coming out of his mouth. And rest in peace to that gentleman, too. Suicide, I don't know if it was on purpose for him to be funny or not. I think it was, because he was so mean, you know, because you got the lovely Linnea Quigley, as we all know, and she's dancing on him in the graveyard, and he's like, have some respect for the dead. Exactly. Suicide gets bit in the head by the most famous zombie, probably, would you agree with that? The most famous zombie in horror movie history, Tarman, who, you know, the gentleman who played Tarman as well, you got to give the credit to that guy, because I don't think they really told him so much what to do. Like, hey, you got this suit on, and it's just crazy the way he moved in that suit. But Tarman bites Suicide on the head, right? I think I can understand why Suicide may not have come back to life, because the movie's all about brains, right? And you got to destroy their brains, or I think you had to really burn them. But then again, did they really kill any zombies in this movie is what I want to know.
Oh, I knew, because, you know, in the second one, the only way they're able to destroy them is through electricity. So the brain thing doesn't work with those zombies. So But I'm trying. I guess the nuke was the only.
The nuke was the only. There are a couple people that die in this movie, and I guess I don't know if you want to call it continuity errors or not. Okay, let's bring this up. Suicide's brain got torn right off by the Tarman. Tarman can barely walk, but if he gets his hands on you, all of a sudden he can control you like no problem. And Suicide of all guys, you know, Linnea Quigley's character, a funny joke. She's like, you know, she's getting butt naked talking about. I want dead guys to eat me alive and stuff. Well, when she comes back to life from dead guys eating her alive, I don't see a single bite scratch on her.
That's true. I never thought about that. But I said before when we were talking about Night of the Living Dead remake in the movies of 90 or 91, whichever one it was, 90, I think, that was the essential zombie movie. Well, really, both of those together, because while everybody thinks of the way you kill zombies is through destroying the brain, and that's the Night of the Living Dead thing. If you ask somebody who's not a huge horror fan, what do zombies do? They would say eat brains, and that's completely from Return of the Living Dead. So, I mean, they both have their parts to kind of make the zombie mythos, you know? So that's something that I hadn't really thought about until watching it again not too long ago. But
what I love about this movie so much is not the zombies so much. To me, this movie... Would I say this is a good zombie movie? Absolutely. But to me, it's legitimately just an incredibly enjoyable, fun horror movie.
Yeah,
period.
Absolutely.
It's why it's my #1. And the reason it is like I said, the non-zombie scenes are perfect. Those are the scenes that are the most enjoyable.
Yeah.
We get over to Ernie Kaltenburners, the mortician. Bert taps him on the shoulder, whips out a pistol on him. You know, his rhythms though, Don Calfa. I don't know what it is about him. He's kind of got like a Tom Atkins thing. It's like he's the middle-aged guy, but his performance is like real to like the core. You know, Clu Gallagher's character is a little bit animated. Obviously, Tom Matthews and James Cameron's characters were a little bit animated, more so James Cameron's character. But Don Calfa, when he comes into the movie, there's a realism that hits that's needed almost, I think.
And another thing too about this movie, thinking about like Night of the Living Dead, and then most zombie movies and shows that have come since, people realize that zombies are a thing, and then you find a protagonist who's like, okay, I'm going to take care of this, you know, whether it be Tony Todd's character in Night of the Living Dead or whatever. In this movie, people just lose their minds the whole time. There's not really one protagonist. Everybody's just losing their mind trying to figure out what to do, and that's really unique and a really cool thing that I really enjoyed about the movie.
I don't know if he was an attorney general in the military or lieutenant or what do we call it? The skinny guy who goes home. You got the wife. Go back and watch this. Okay, so the guy gets home to his lavish house, whatever this house was. It was like a mansion. You know, this skinny old guy, military, just you can tell he's in a bad mood. The wife, when she's like, "Hey, hello, dear, how was your day?" Like, it almost sounds like she has an accent. But then again, like when you hear her say what he goes, "Crap as usual. What's for dinner?" And he's like, "We're having lamb chops." It's like there's no accent. But before, I swear to God, she has like a weird accent.
Yeah,
and her acting is straight up play theater. Like she's like her facial expressions and stuff. So she's like, "Lamb chops. Had them for lunch," and walks right out. Like I can relate to that guy some days. I think all of us can. You know, my brother is in the military, and one day I'm gonna get him to fess up to all this secret stuff that we're not supposed to know about. But he plays it off like he doesn't know anything. The guy is so mean to his wife and so, like, just dry. But when he gets the call at probably 4 in the morning about finding the trioxin barrels, he almost sounds happy. And I credit that to Dan O'Bannon saying, look, the military does so much crooked stuff. Or not crooked stuff, because we love our troops, but they do so much stuff probably that we would drop dead out of fear if we knew what's going on. Go back to the scene and watch it. When he gets the call about they found the tanks, he's happy. He's like, oh, you found the tanks? Okay. And he's writing down notes like, okay, so what happened when why didn't you call us earlier about this tank? Okay, understandable. Like, he's totally fine. Like, you're taking an order off of like a card catalog for like the turkey things you get, like, or something.
Right, it's like he knows his regular life is just, and he's ready for some, you know, for something.
And then, like, it's the happiest call in the world, and this is what was so surprising. So they get the call, and he's like, okay, so You know, what happened? What happened when the rain hit the mud? Oh, really? Okay, okay, okay. So, okay, got it. Okay, appreciate it. Then he calls up the guy who's in this desolate area out in the middle of nowhere, and it's where they shoot missiles. And it's this one guy, and he calls him up, and the guy's like, "Yes, sir. Yes, sir." What I thought was funny in that scene too was like the passcode he gives him. It was like hot dog. 876 marshmallow 43. Got it, sir. Yes, sir. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
And so the missile launches, and they get the call back. Clue's character's like, I just talked to the Army. What they gonna say? And he's like, they said they got some kind of contingency plan for this.
I'm sure it was really crazy because, you know, 80s was like the Cold War was still a thing, and, you know, people were still worried about being nuked on a daily basis.
And here's Dan O'Bannon just making a complete joke about it. But what's funny to me is I wouldn't even call it satire. It's like the movie is almost a metaphor for just like, what if the Army really does, and the military in general, not just the Army, does things that would shock the average citizen, like stuff, you know, that's, I think about that on a critical level.
Well, that's something that this movie gives you that the Romero movies don't. A reason for what's happening, and a reason why the zombies do what they do. You know, it's because they're in pain, and they're trying to get those endorphins from the brain to feel better, where you don't know exactly why in the Romero movies why they're doing anything that they're doing.
The soundtrack. How many horror movies had not punk rock? We're not talking Green Day. We're not talking Blink-182. We're talking 45 Grave, The Cramps, psychobilly music. The soundtrack is, that's got to be one of the things that makes it a completely different element. And I think, you know, if you had a different soundtrack in this movie, it would almost be more scary. Like, you know, when the zombies start to come out the ground, the "Do You Want a Party" song kicks in. I swear, Tommy, if you would put the movie on mute and play, you know, just a creepy soundtrack, that movie would be scary. You know, if I'm having the worst day of my life and I need, you know, the worst day of my life, Return of the Living Dead is the movie that can make me happy for an hour and a half.
Awesome.
Point blank, period. And, you know, I just think it's the greatest horror movie ever made. And that's a very strong statement to make, but it is to me. And Return of the Living Dead is the greatest horror movie I'll ever watch. I don't think it'll ever be beaten. But it also matches my personality. You know, we love movies on not just a literal sense. You know, the movies, they take over our lives in every aspect. It's the artwork of the poster. It's the soundtrack. It's the little nuances that where it creeps into our life, I guess. So Return of the Living Dead just does that on every single level to me. So
it pushes all the buttons that just makes a great movie, period. So
while the sequels, you know, don't live up to the original, they're special in their own way. And maybe one day we'll talk about 2 and 3.
Yeah. The ones after 3,
you know,
we'll never talk about those.
What's interesting, in the horror community, Return of the Living Dead is considered a trilogy. You know, usually I'm not one to be like that. Like, come on, respect the filmmakers, respect the people. But this is one case, you know, I've seen Necropolis. I have not seen the one after it. I think it was
Rave to the Grave.
And I don't need to see it.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll watch it one day, just out of sheer curiosity.
To me, those seem just like a cash grab. I think it was the same producer, but that's really about it, yeah.
But Return of the Living Dead, it's one of the greatest horror movies, period. This is Tommy, and this is Christian. Hit that subscribe button, ding the bell, and be sure to drop your comment below. Also, let us know another movie you would like us to do a roundtable on. Tommy's got a movie lined up for us to do another roundtable on, and I can't wait to talk about this one. It's gonna be good. I'm not gonna give anything away. So until then, we will see you guys next time.